Luke Skywalker's Jedi Praxium may just be one of the strangest iterations of the Jedi Order in galactic history. Because Luke had to rebuild the Order from scratch, there were a lot of things he had to do different. This extends not only to the curriculum and culture, but also to the Jedi's very lightsabers. Limitations presented to this era of Jedi forced them to get creative with the materials that they used in their signature weapons. This results in some of the weirdest and the most bizarre lightsaber variants in all of the lore. Greetings again, lore junkies, and welcome back to the archives. In today's Holocron upload, we are going to be talking about why Luke's Jedi rejected the traditional way to build a lightsaber, and the strange weapons that resulted from that rejection. Like we said before, the primary reason for the odd construction habits were because of their limited resources. The new Jedi Order would not be privy to holocrons or records of the old Jedi for several more decades. Starting out, everything was being learned and taught through lived experience from Luke. Luke focused on teaching his students through self-discovery. However, he withheld knowledge of how to construct a lightsaber until it was absolutely necessary. Somewhat, Luke even feared the weapon. In his academy, the lightsaber was treated as a badge of authority. It marked one being a Jedi Knight, so it was very ceremonious to own one. Yet, when it finally came time to construct their weapon, Luke did not provide his Jedi with any materials. As a part of their training, and to truly bond with their lightsaber, his students were expected to go out and to find their own materials. And a lot of the time, this included their crystals as well. Because of the Empire, Kaiburr crystals were a rarity by the era of the NJO. In fact, they were all but extinct and nearly impossible to find. Luke himself didn't even own one. He had taken the elements and forged a synthetic crystal for his green lightsaber. Jaina Solo, his niece, also made use of a synthetic crystal to produce her own purple amethyst blade. It's likely that the only lightsaber in the new Jedi Order to have a real Kaiburr crystal was the blade of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which was kept in a museum. But as Luke teaches, while Kaiburr is always preferred, it is not a necessity. One can use other precious stones as focusing crystals as well, so long as they handle the energy correctly. Corusca gems were used both by Gantoris and Jacen Solo for their lightsabers, which gave them a very unique design. Corusca gems were extremely valuable stones, usually intended for jewelry because of their sparkling beauty. Gantoris came across 3 of these gems when the spirit of Exar Kun taught him how to build a lightsaber prematurely. Gantoris ventured into the dark forests of Yavin 4 and came across one of the Sith temples built by Exar. Embedded in the walls were 3 Corusca gems, which he took for himself. When using these, his lightsaber produced a purple color, but had the unique appearance of wisps of rainbow light running up and down the length of the blade. Gantoris also had a dual phase function, allowing his lightsaber to extend up to 3 times the standard length of a normal blade. Jacen Solo would also receive a Corusca gem as an expensive gift from Lando Calrissian. This caused his blade to produce a brilliant emerald color, more bold than the usual green lightsaber even. Both Gantoris and another Jedi by the name of Corran Horn had to build hilts to their lightsabers out of nothing but scrap. Gantoris used the technology left behind by the rebellion in the bowels of the Yavin Temple. But Corran Horn had to get much more creative. Having infiltrated a gang of pirates, Horn was forced to make an improvised lightsaber out of literal garbage, one of my favorite lightsabers in the lore. For the laser arrangement, he had to use a dynoric laser feed line from a broken blaster cannon. A throttle assembly and a handlebar tube from a junk speeder bike would serve as the shaft and guts of the lightsaber's mechanics. And for the focusing crystal, he plucked a diamond, an emerald, and a Duran fire jewel which had been used to decorate an old bottle of Savarine brandy. According to Corran, the most difficult part wasn't finding the gems, but rather the power cell to the lightsaber. He was using lightsaber schematics passed down from him and his grandfather, Nija Helkion, and the schematics called for power cells that were extremely out of date by Horn's era, so he had to substitute it with a modern cell which was much more efficient. The lightsaber worked perfectly once he went through the Force ritual of assembling it. And just like Gantoris, it too had dual phase capabilities. But as the years went on, Luke was able to provide crystals for some of his students in the form of Kaiburr shards. Now this crystal we speak of is not the crystals of Ilum, but rather it is spelled Kaiburr. This was once a single giant crystal from the planet of Minban that possessed incredible powers. When held in the hand of a Force sensitive, it was said to magnify their power by 1,000-fold. This comes from the book Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which takes place just after the events of A New Hope. This large gem was sought by the Empire, but it was discovered that the incredible powers of the crystal could only be used on the planet of Minban. If it was taken off-world, the crystal was practically useless. To keep it protected, Luke kept the Kaiburr crystal in his academy, where it was the target of many thieves. Later in his career as Grand Master, Luke discovered that it had potent uses as a lightsaber crystal if shards were carefully cut from it. In fact, according to Luke, it was the most powerful lightsaber crystal in existence if it was used and tuned properly. So several students in Luke's Praxium could use Kaiburr shards, including Leia and later even Luke. But one Jedi didn't use a crystal at all. The Mon Calamari the Master Cilghal built her lightsaber to look more organic, like a piece from a reef. Within it, she used what is known as an Ultima Pearl, which is a very precious stone from the deep seas of her homeworld. And this actually brings us to the second reason why the lightsabers of this era were so different. Each lightsaber was specifically personalized for the Jedi that built and used it. Luke's order had a unique identity because his Jedi were not taken as infants. In times past, the order itself was its own culture, a culture that each Jedi were expected to adhere to regardless of their species. Everyone grew up in the temple, and so that essentially became their place of origin. But Luke's Jedi were mostly adults who had their own past and experienced lives before they were ever Jedi at all. They didn't live monastic lives the way the old Jedi did. They were allowed to own things, to have material possessions. And with this, the Jedi of Luke's order often customized their lightsabers to reflect where they had come from. Cilghal making hers look like it came straight from the ocean of her homeworld is one example. Another is the saber of Tenel Ka Djo. Tenel was a woman who was the princess of the Hapes consortium, but also the daughter of a Dathomiri Nightsister. Despite being royalty, she preferred the ways of her mother's people, and was, for all intents and purposes, a Nightsister herself. When crafting her lightsaber, she used a volcanic gem from Yavin 4, but she decided to use a tooth of a rancor for her hilt. The tooth had been a family heirloom, taken from the mouth of her grandmother's pet rancor. She hollowed out the tooth and fashioned it into a lightsaber to represent her past. The only issue was that the tooth was too small to properly fit a laser arrangement. Tenel was too impatient to find another suitable hilt, however. To make things worse, she felt left behind by her rapidly progressing classmates, so she decided that her skills as a warrior would make up for any shortcomings presented by her lightsaber. However, during a sparring session with Jacen Solo, her defective lightsaber malfunctioned, causing Jacen to break through the blade and sever her arm by accident. The lightsaber then fell to the ground and exploded. Much later, she decided to continue her training as a Jedi and fashioned a new lightsaber. This time, she took a rancor tooth from the wild world of Dathomir. She made sure it was of proper size. To complete the weapon, Tenel then plucked the Galnorian rainbow gems from her princess tiara. In one lightsaber, she was able to meld and reconcile two halves of her heritage, Dathomirian witch and princess of Hapes, while also being a Jedi as well. Her new lightsaber ultimately reflected the culmination of a personal journey of identity. This of course resulted in her being a much stronger Jedi than she ever thought she could be. The lightsaber of Luke's Jedi Order were a lot stranger simply because there were no unified rules any longer of how to create them. Those had gone extinct. The rules themselves were relics. The best they had were instructions on how not to vaporize yourself upon ignition. But as for style and gem selection, it was all up to Luke's students, and that's exactly how Luke wanted it. It resulted in a distinct level of freedom of Luke's Jedi, one that had allowed for more customization and personality. At first, the lightsabers were characterized by the limitations of the new Jedi, but as the NJO era advances, it became more about self-expression. The lightsabers they wielded were a physical representation of their personal journey in the Force. No two Jedi were alike, and neither were their approaches to learning the Jedi path. The struggles of the Jedi fundamentally changed how Luke's Jedi related to their weapons, to the Force, and ultimately to themselves. What initially appeared to be a weakness, improvised components, unstable materials, unorthodox crystals, ironically forged an era of Jedi who were among the most powerful and enlightened ever. Take the Corusca gems for example. They were not inherently ever meant to be used as focusing crystals. They were jewelry stones, prized for beauty rather than for function. Yet when placed inside a lightsaber, they produced blades that behaved differently. Unstable in appearance, shimmering with rainbow wisps, visually alive in a way traditional Kaiburr blades are not. For the likes of Gantoris and Jacen Solo, this instability demanded a deeper level of control. The blade did not feel perfect. It required constant awareness, constant harmony between wielder and weapon. And in mastering that balance, these Jedi learned to regulate emotion, intent, and focus at a far higher level than their predecessors. Corran Horn's lightsaber was arguably stranger, built from scrap, powered by a modern cell forced into ancient schematics, using mismatched gemstones scavenged from literal trash. On paper, it shouldn't have worked at all. Yet because of this, Corran Horn understood every single component of his weapon on an intimate level. There was no mysticism hiding its flaws, no sacred tradition to lean on. Every ignition was a reminder that the weapon functioned only because of his understanding, his discipline, and his connection to the Force. That saber did not inspire confidence through perfection, it demanded responsibility and knowledge. Even the Kaiburr shards, often seen as a gift or an advantage, came with their own limitations. Their immense power required deep restraint. The crystal amplified not only strength but intent. For Luke's students, this meant that aggression, fear, or arrogance were immediately punished. Only Jedi who achieved genuine emotional clarity could safely wield them. In this way, the raw power was a teacher rather than a crutch. Even Tenel Ka Djo's tragic first lightsaber fits this pattern. Her rancor tooth hilt was flawed. It was too small, structurally unsound. It cost her her arm. But the failure was a crucible, a teaching moment rather than an endpoint. She rebuilt her lightsaber, melding Dathomirian tradition, royal heritage, and Jedi discipline. She was a Jedi who confronted loss, identity, and limitation. Her power came from a reconciliation. This is the beauty of Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order. By lacking resources, they gained wisdom. By abandoning tradition, they achieved deeper understanding. By wielding imperfect weapons, they forged more complete Jedi. The old Jedi built lightsabers as symbols of mastery. Luke's Jedi built them as mirrors of the self. And in doing that, they created an era where enlightenment mattered more than elegance, and where some of the most powerful Jedi in history emerged not in spite of their limitations, but because of them. So what do you think, my friends? If you had your choice, would you rather have access to Kaiburr crystals and traditional styles like the Jedi of the Old Republic and of the Clone Wars? Or would you welcome the idea of scrounging around for materials, but ultimately creating a much more personalized lightsaber? Let us know which of the lightsabers of Luke's order you found to be the most compelling. And until next time, thank you so much for joining us here in the archives today. Let me know in the comments down below if you would like me to look for more lore in the NJO era. And as always, wherever your path leads you next, may the Force be with you.